YouTube, welcome back to my channel. I'm here to talk about something that I never thought would actually come out. Nobody from the band would actually talk about this, and I'm actually really happy that they did, because I've been saying this for a minute, and when I did say it, there was a lot of like Gen Z followers of this band that were trying to come for me, and I was like, look, I said what I said, I'm right, and it's coming out in 2022 that I was right. So, the band in question that I am talking about is Fall Out Boy. And if you have been paying attention to this channel, you may know that I put out a Fall Out Boy video back in 2018 and 2017, talking about the whole Mania album release cycle and that whole era, and how it was basically a train wreck, and it did not deserve to actually be out there in the world, because most people my age and older who have been Fall Out Boy fans since the beginning or around the beginning all know that the project that was just put out in 2018 is garbage, and that it doesn't have a lot of listenability, and there aren't a lot of songs from that album that I actually come back to. And I really haven't listened to that album since 2018. And so, yeah. Fall Out Boy, don't know what you were doing with that album, but that was a hot mess. And there are days where I just try to pretend like you never put it out, because literally, why would you do that? But I was recently watching a video on the internet, on YouTube, and they were talking about Joe Trohman. And if you don't know who Joe Trohman is, he's the guitarist of Fall Out Boy, and he actually is putting out a memoir of his life. So basically like an autobiography of his life. And so he's putting out this book, and in the book he talks about Mania, and how basically he didn't really have a lot of creative control around that album, and that he wasn't really fond of it, and that he doesn't really think it's the best music that Fall Out Boy have ever put out. And I just want to say that I told you so, because you may not know, but I put out a video back in 2018 about Fall Out Boy, about Mania, about the whole album as a whole. I did like a review of it and everything. And I basically gave it a C+, and I basically was like, this is not Fall Out Boy's best work, and this doesn't even represent Fall Out Boy in the new generation of Fall Out Boy, because this isn't even as good as American Beauty, American Psycho, or Save Rock and Roll. And both of those albums are not their best work, but I mean, they exist, and they're way better than Mania. But nothing can hold a candle to their previous work back in 2005, 2007, and 2008. So basically, I said what I said. And then I actually wrote a whole blog post where I went even more in depth about the album. And at the time, I was a part of this group on Facebook. I know, super lame. But I was a part of this group on Facebook that I found somehow, and it was basically a Fall Out Boy group. And so I posted my review of Mania in that group. And all I got from a lot of, and I know it was a lot of Gen Z, because a lot of millennials, I think a lot of millennials at this point, if you're still a fan of bands like Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco, which I have some things to say about Panic at the Disco, but if you're still a fan of like bands like Fall Out Boy or Panic at the Disco or MCR or even Paramore, then you are old enough to be able to discern of good music, right? You're able to, if a band is not giving you satisfactory music, you're allowed to basically critique it without saying that the band sucks. And that's basically what I was doing. And then Gen Z thought they were being clever. It wasn't a lot of people, but it was a few Gen Z people who were coming at me and being like, your opinion is wrong, the album is so great, and all of these things. And that was what I pointed out during a video I had put out previously before the Mania video, where I basically was talking about Fall Out Boy in the 2010s and basically their trajectory as a band, and how basically Fall Out Boy had fallen off. And when I said that, you know, I really did mean it, because it was hard at that time, because a lot of Fall Out Boy's main focus was being this band on the radio who, catered to Gen Z and was like this internet band, and was like, the memes and the jokes and the emojis and the sayings and the whatever, and like, it was just weird to me. I didn't, you guys are in your 40s, okay? You guys are in your 40s. You guys were born in the 80s. You guys are, born in the 80s. You're old at this point, and I said what I said. Fall Out Boy is basically dad rock at this point. You guys are in your 40s. You guys are not spring chickens anymore. And you guys, I get it that you want to cater to a new generation, and I respect that. And I get wanting to be fresh and new and at the forefront of people's minds, but I want you to do that without taking the integrity out of a band. And that is something that I felt was taken out of with Mania. And I said that back then, and you guys got mad, and it was whatever. And, I'm 30 years old. So I got to grow up with Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy, I've said this, I'll say it again, was the first band that I ever got into that was like game-changing for me, that helped me get into a lot of other bands. That was like the band that I listened to that was like not a band that was like recommended to me from my sisters or my parents or my other siblings. Like, it was just a band that I loved, and a band that I cherished, and a band that I got into all on my own. And then it helped me get into a lot of other music along the way. And so I'm always going to like this band. I'm always going to have admiration for this band. I'm always going to love Fall Out Boy's early work. And I'm not going to say that Stay Rock and Roll or American Beauty, American Psycho are bad albums. I've been re-listening to Fall Out Boy a little bit lately, and they're not bad albums. They're just not their greatest work. And, compared to Mania, obviously they are above average, because Mania's like down here, and Save Rock and Roll and American Beauty, American Psycho are like average right here. And so it's like, it's better than Mania, but it's not their best efforts. And ever since they put out albums like From Under the Cork Tree and Infinity on High, and their magnum opus, as the community would say, Fully Ado, and ever since they put those albums out, it's been really hard to top them. And I know that Fall Out Boy are really trying like hard to just, again, cater to Gen Z and be this internet band and be the last standing band on radio and stuff like that, which kids today don't listen to radio. But it's like, Fall Out Boy, I get what you're trying to do, and I respect it, but you have to realize that you guys are old. You're in your 40s. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not trying to say that 40 is old, but in the landscape of like music and like the internet, 40 is old. Like, in your 40s is old. And so it's just like, if you guys would just tone it down, we'd be happy. And I think that the pandemic has given Fall Out Boy some time to breathe, and some time to really take time off and to really like recalibrate. Because I don't really know what Joe, obviously now I know what Joe has been up to. He's been writing a book. But I really didn't know what Joe or Andy had been up to. I didn't really know what Patrick had been up to. I follow Pete on Instagram, and he's just been being a dad and putting up, like, dad videos, like cute little dad videos, and like being the dad on the internet. And then he had a radio show on Apple Music where he basically just talked about, music in a certain landscape. And then, I noticed that they put out, I don't know if it was just Patrick or if it was Fall Out Boy in general, but I know that they put out the theme song to that new, like, Disney Junior show about Spider-Man. Like, I think it's called, like, Spider-Man and Friends or something like that. And, by the way, Patrick killed that. His vocals were amazing on that song. I know it's a song for a silly little kids show, but Patrick killed it on the vocals. And that's something else I want to say, is that Patrick's vocals are aging like fine wine. I recently said on Twitter that I wanted a Patrick Stump and Hayley Williams album, because them combined, oh my gosh, that would be the blackest album ever. Like, that is so chef's kiss, baby. Both of their voices combined, ooh, beautiful. I am still jealous of all the people who got to go to Monumentor and hear them sing together, because that must have been incredible. But, yeah. And then Andy, I'm sure, has been doing stuff with his band. You know, he has other bands that he does, like in the hardcore scene and metal scene and stuff like that. And then, of course, as I said, Joe has been writing a book. And so, yeah, it's coming out that Joe is saying that he didn't really have a lot of creative control when it came to Mania, and that he wasn't really fond of a lot of the music. And it just felt like, and we've all said this as fans, or at least the older fans, like the people who actually grew up on Fall Out Boy, like in their heyday, we've always said that Mania, and even some stuff on like ABAP, it felt like Joe was just standing there, like not really doing anything with his instrument. And it felt really sad because it was like, you have these incredible, talented, like extremely talented musicians in your band. Like you have Andy, and you have Joe, and you have Patrick, and even Pete. And you guys are extremely talented. Like you guys are. But why don't you just take advantage of that? Like, I don't understand. And it's not like I'm trying to make you guys go back to like 2005 and put out another pop punk record. Like, you do not have to do that. And that's something that I always do, like, and it's hard for me not to because Paramore is one of my favorite bands of all time. And so it's hard for me not to compare the two, but it's like Paramore has been able to come from the pop punk world as well, but they've also been able to make these incredibly catchy pop records without ever compromising their artistic integrity. And that's something I've always loved about the band, because even with self-titled record and of course After Laughter, it might seem like it's really poppy and funky and all these things, but you can definitely hear, you know, Taylor on guitar, and you can definitely hear, you know, Zach on drums. Like, it just is what it is. Like, you can hear these elements. And even with this new record, which we don't know when that's coming out, but whenever Six More comes out, Haley has been hinting to the fact that she wants Zach to go crazy on the drums, and she wants Taylor to go crazy on guitar. And even if it is more funky and like a continuation of After Laughter, she wants them to go hard on their instruments because that's important. But they're allowed to evolve because that's what people do. They evolve. And that's what people don't seem to understand, is that it's okay to evolve as long as you do it in a good way. And Fall Out Boy were not doing it in a good way. And Joe basically proved my point and basically told y'all, look, the band and I didn't have a lot of creative control, and it was mostly the Pete Wentz show, as we know. And, you know, Patrick probably too. And, you know, Joe and Andy didn't really have a lot to say in the music, and they didn't even really like work in the studio together. They kind of just sent stuff back and forth. And so it was like, you know, Joe and Andy aren't having a lot of creative control with the music that's coming out, and so then it looks like really bad, and then you put out trash music like Mania. And so I just wanted to put this video out there because I am tired of having to feel like my music from when I was a kid, that's still out here trying to do something with their lives, right? I hate having to defend them sometimes because it's hard, because I can't really. And when I make my voice heard on how I feel about a band that I grew up on, people shouldn't, you know, get mad at us because we're the ones who grew up on them. Like, you're growing up on Secondhand, and we grew up on them from Jump Street. So we understand their musicality better than you ever will. And I respect that you guys like the new version of them. Like, that's cool, and I'm glad that you're into them. But just remember that we were the first ones to really be into this band, and so you have to respect us and the way that we're going to feel when a band doesn't do what we like. Case in point, I said I would talk about this. Panic at the Disco, or the Brendan Urie solo project. I have not listened to the latest Brendan Urie solo project, Panic at the Disco record, but all I'm hearing from lifelong Panic fans is that this is not their best effort at all. And it's starting to really wear on people how, like, not cohesive or musically sound, or his voice, or whatever this record is doing. And I respect that, because you guys are allowed to feel that way, because if you grew up on OG Panic, you're allowed to feel the way you are feeling, and I respect that heavily. because it's not fair. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to them for you guys to just lie and pretend like you like what you don't like. It's okay. So that's how I feel about Panic. I felt that way for a while. Like, I really have not been that jazzed about their music. I've never been like a huge like stan of Panic. I've always been an above average fan because they're, you know, associated with Fall Out Boy and that whole scene, so it was easy to just be like an above average fan, but I was never like a stan of Panic at the Disco. But even I know that their music has very much gone in a turn that we are not really like vibing with, and so it's hard sometimes. But I just want to put this video out there to show that I was right, because I'm tired of not feeling like I was right about the fact that Mania was a trash album, and Joe thinks so too. And you know, you can go look up the articles and stuff that he's been putting out recently about his book, and there's some like Rolling Stones articles and other articles that I will post down below. But basically, Joe Trohman is right. Mania is trash. And if you have an opinion on a band that you like a lot, or you like they're your favorite band, but you are not vibing with the music they're putting out, it is okay to express your opinion, and no one should tell you that you're wrong, because if you love them enough, they will give them good criticism so they can fix the mistakes and come back better than ever, which is all I want for Fall Out Boy. I just want them to come back better than ever, because they're still a great band. They are dad rock. Like I said, they're getting old, so they are dad rock at this point. But I still like them. I think I will always like them. I may not, you know, always agree with everything they do, but I'm always going to have a sweet spot in my heart for Fall Out Boy and the whole band in general. So, yeah. And, yeah. Patrick and Haley solo project together, collab project thing, I want it. I want it real bad. I want it real bad, because both of their voices are aging like fine wine, and I need it. I need it. Alright, well, that's it. I was right about Mania, and you're allowed to have opinions about your favorite bands. Okay, well, until the next video, peace and blessings.